I have submitted this story anonymously. The reason for doing so will become apparent to all who are listening. I have had my eye on this channel for quite some time, and I deliberately selected you to tell my story. I like your voice, and based on your past content, I think you'll give this story your undivided attention. If you're going to use my story for a video, do not change a word. I don't mind your audience thinking that I'm some kind of unhinged lunatic. Perhaps there's some truth to that, but I ultimately view myself as a result of a very unbalanced equation. I expect that this tale will not go over well with some folks. Allow me to respond to that by saying that I'm someone who truly does not care about the opinions of others. Most of you are naive and misguided, and sometimes even downright stupid. You can slap me with labels such as sociopath, an asshole, incel, whatever you wish. But if I were to smash through your bedroom window at night and rush you with a knife, would your little insults really matter then? I'm guessing not. Now for the setup. I grew up in a very unassuming suburban environment, with white picket fences and family barbecues. From a very young age, I was aware that I have always had a capacity for violence. At the drop of a hat, I would have no problem bludgeoning someone to death with a fire poker. Not that I've ever done such a thing, but you get the point. However, this affliction of mine was always methodical. It served a purpose and was never beyond my control. There was a boy in middle school, we'll call him Kyle, who made the mistake of targeting me for his bullying antics, calling me disparaging names, throwing stuff at me, and even spitting on me during bus rides. I was only 14 at the time, but as soon as his saliva made contact with my skin for the first time, I began to plot my revenge. You see, Kyle happened to live in the same neighborhood as me, so finding out where he lived was a simple task. Most of the houses between mine and his were still under construction. I spent about a month staking out his place from a nearby hiding spot and observing the routine of Kyle's family. Kyle was an only child, and both of his parents worked long hours, which might explain why he was such an asshole. I figured out that on Friday nights, Kyle was left alone. He would almost always have a pizza delivered to his house around 8 o'clock and would always order from the same place. Kyle was a creature of habit. During all this time, he would continue to pick on me during bus rides, but I took it in stride because I knew what was coming his way. Everything about my plan seemed to line up quite nicely. You see, the front porch of Kyle's home was undergoing some kind of remodeling. The contractors that Kyle's parents hired were careless enough to leave behind a very large crowbar, lying on a bench right next to the front door. During one of my stakeouts, I swiped the object from the front porch before making my way back to my house, 2 streets over. I think you know where this is going. On one Friday night, I made my way back to Kyle's place and rang the doorbell at around 7:45. I stepped off to the side in case Kyle looked through the peephole. I was wearing a mask to conceal my identity, but I didn't want to be seen, because not even Kyle would be dumb enough to open a door with a masked person standing on the other side. Fortunately for me, Kyle opened the door and wasn't even paying attention to what was in front of him. He was looking at what I believed to be a Game Boy Color, which was very popular at the time. He stood in the doorway for a few moments, fiddling with the Game Boy, before finally looking up. I wonder what went through his mind as the metal handle of the bar smashed into his face. Kyle collapsed onto the floor, and I stood on the front porch and watched him as he flailed around, cupping his hands over his nose. I wish I would have had time to give him a couple more whacks, but I knew that the pizza man would show up any minute, and of course, Kyle's wails of pain would soon attract a neighbor, so I made my escape, darting between houses and making it back to my place without being seen by anyone. It was perfect. Of course, the community was in an uproar. "Not even our children are safe. Oh no! The overweight police chief even made a few appearances on local television stations, vowing that he would do everything in his power to capture whoever did this horrible crime. They brought the entire school into the gym to explain to us that one of our classmates was violently attacked. But to be honest, nobody really gave a shit about Kyle. Kyle's nose had to be surgically reconstructed, and when he finally returned to school, he didn't seem to have any interest in picking on me or anyone else for that matter. Aside from seeing the occasional patrol car cruising around my neighborhood, not much changed. I wasn't planning on making an encore. Even at 14, I knew that luck had a lot to do with my plan playing out the way it did, and I was smart enough not to push it. No one even looked my way. I was never questioned by the police, and they never found out who viciously attacked Kyle. I have absolutely no regrets about what I did. Kyle got exactly what he deserved. I haven't told this story to many people, because it requires a listener to suspend their disbelief. When I've shared my story in the past, I usually get looked at like I suffer from some kind of mental condition or something. Nothing could be further from the truth. I know the ball from the bounce. You have to when you work in finances like me. I'll keep this short and to the point. Back in 2007, I used to live just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, in a very laid-back but very populated suburb. I lived in a townhome that was about a 30-minute commute to my job in the city. I was on a salary, which meant that my hours would vary from week to week. I could come home as early as 12 o'clock in the afternoon, or as late as 3 o'clock in the morning. It really depended on what was going on at Wall Street. I remember that this happened on Father's Day. After work that day, I decided to spend some time with my parents and have dinner with them. All went well, and I made it back to my place at around 9 p.m. As soon as you walked into my townhouse, directly in front of you was a staircase that led to a small hallway, with the master bedroom being the first door and the spare bedroom being right next to it. My usual routine was to grab a snack from the downstairs kitchen before heading upstairs. But since I had dinner that night, I decided that I would just go upstairs, take a shower, and get some sleep. The first thing I noticed was that the light switch at the bottom of the staircase was not working. I figured that the light bulb had shorted out and needed to be replaced. No big deal. However, as soon as I hung up my jacket and began to make my way up the stairs, a low hissing sound stopped me in my tracks. The sound was very disturbing. It sounded like a pissed-off lion. I immediately looked up. I still get an icy feeling in my stomach when I recall what was at the top of the staircase. During nights, the light from a nearby lamppost would come through the upstairs window and provided just enough light to see the door of the master bedroom from downstairs. The door was open, but that wasn't what made my skin crawl. On the ceiling just above the doorway was a dark figure. I'm going to tell you what it looked like to me, knowing full well that most of you won't believe me. Trust me, I've spent years trying to convince myself that I didn't see what I thought I saw, but the voice in the back of my mind keeps telling me, no, you saw it. You can try to deny it all you want to, but you know the truth. What I saw on the upstairs ceiling appeared to be a person on all fours in a quadruped position. From my vantage point, I couldn't make out many details, but one thing that made my stomach turn was when the figure moved its head, and locks of long hair fell from its frame and dangled. The fear became overwhelming, and I let out an embarrassing yelp and staggered back. The figure then let out a guttural shriek and disappeared from my field of view. I heard a few thudding noises followed by the sound of a window smashing. I fled the house and retreated to my car, where I phoned the police. After 10 minutes of heavy breathing and looking side to side from the safety of my locked car, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway behind me. 2 officers approached my car, and I rolled down my window and explained the situation to them. The 2 officers entered my townhouse with guns drawn. After about 20 minutes, they re-emerged. They searched the entire house, and aside from a shattered window in the hallway, nothing appeared to be out of place. Of course, I went through the notions of giving my statement and filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. I told the officers that I saw someone at the top of my staircase in front of my bedroom door, which was true, but I left out the part that the person appeared to be crawling on the ceiling, like they were possessed. I moved out of that place into a shitty apartment closer to my work about 2 weeks after that night. To this day, I fail to come up with any kind of rational explanation for what took place that night. I'm not exactly the kind of person who just makes things up for attention. I've gone down the rabbit hole of online communities, sharing their experiences with cryptids, aliens, and other unknown creatures that allegedly walk this earth. And even though I 100% stand by my story, I can honestly say that these people have way too much time on their hands. I don't want to end up like one of those obsessive people who go insane chasing a ghost. I've come to terms with the fact that I'll never truly know what I saw on my ceiling that night. I'll just put my story out there and let people take it for what it's worth. Thank you for listening. I grew up during the 1980s in a very tight-knit community in Georgia. When I was a kid, I used to love camping in my backyard. Almost every Friday night, me and my little brother Donnie would set up a tent in our backyard and spend the night playing with our G.I. Joes inside the tent. Our neighborhood was nice, but the surrounding area was a bit shady. You see, this was at the height of the crack cocaine epidemic, and within a few years our small town became infested by addicts and drug dealers. I remember there was an old man named Mr. Carl, who was once a pilot in World War II. He used to live across the street from us. His wife died of cancer around 1984, and after that, he went off the deep end. 3 years after his wife's death, he became addicted to crack and began wandering the streets at night. It wasn't long after that when his house got repossessed by the bank, and Mr. Carl became homeless. Me and Donnie would see him almost every morning sleeping on a bench at our bus stop. Sometimes he would be awake and would talk to us. We knew Mr. Carl, so we weren't afraid of him, and he never tried anything with us. He was always very friendly. After a while, Donnie and I noticed that Mr. Carl was no longer around. We asked our parents if they knew anything about what might have happened to him, but they didn't have a clue. I can't recall how much time went by since the disappearance of Mr. Carl, but I would say it was at least a month. So on one Friday night, me and my brother were in our backyard playing with these rubber band rifles our dad made for us. It was a piece of wood with a wooden clip glued to the top of it and a nail sticking out the front, so you could stretch a rubber band around the nail and clip it to the top. That way, when you release the clip, the rubber band went flying. Me and Donnie were shooting up plastic toy soldiers when we heard something rustling in the bushes outside. Now, this is Georgia. We've chased away our fair share of raccoons and stray dogs. And with our new makeshift weapons, we were feeling extra brave that night. We decided not to go get our dad, and that we would handle the intruder ourselves. So we both exited the tent and made our way to the very back of the yard, where a chain-link fence separated our property from a small forest area. Donnie had brought along the flashlight and was pointing it into the forest just beyond the fence. When we got to the fence line, a figure emerged from behind a tree. I recognized the jacket that the person was wearing. It was a dark brown bomber-style jacket, and I saw that the person was also wearing one of those Army veteran caps. There's only one person I knew who wore a jacket like that, Mr. Carl. However, when I got a better look at the guy in the woods, it didn't really look like Mr. Carl. He was definitely wearing his clothing, but the man appeared to be way too young to be Mr. Carl. I couldn't get a good look at the man's face. He was looking down, so the bill of his cap concealed his features. That's when I noticed the dark red stains all over the man's jacket and jeans. Me and Donnie just stared at the man for about 30 seconds before asking him what he was doing back there. The man then reached down and grabbed a large axe that was lying at his feet. He then began coming towards the fence. Me and my brother dropped our wooden guns and took off back towards the house. As soon as I turned around, I felt something fly past my head. I looked to the side to see the axe flipping through the air. It crashed into the tent, causing it to collapse. The rest of that night is a blur to me. According to our dad, when me and Don burst into the house, we were absolutely hysterical. It took about an hour to get the full story out of us, and by that time, the mysterious man in Mr. Carl's jacket was gone. I just remember my parents talking to a police officer in the living room later that night. As far as I'm aware, there was never any follow-up, and I don't know if they ever caught the guy or retrieved the axe he threw into our backyard. This incident effectively put an end to our Friday night camping, and we never figured out what exactly happened to Mr. Carl. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of Based on True Events. If you enjoyed these narrations and would like your story to be featured in this series, please send in your written experience to unit522stories@outlook.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, I'm your Uncle Unit, and as always, never forget